What up guys, Super Metal 1983 here bringing us me top 20 albums of 2013. Now I know this is a bit late, but what can you do? I was quite busy over the past couple of month or so, it kind of got pushed back. I was scheduled to do it just before New Year's Day, but a lot of plans came up and a lot of stuff, and having to wait for albums to come in and bits and bobs prevented us from doing it. So, but now that I've got some free time, I can do it for you today. So yeah, we've got the top 20 albums and also 2 honourable mentions that I feel deserve a bit of a mention. Just remember, this is my list, not yours. So if you disagree with that, then whatever. Just this is my list, not yours. End of the day. So yeah, let's get on with the honourable mentions. First off, we've got The Paradigm Shift by Korn. This album was released a little bit later in the year. I'm going to be honest with you, I wasn't really that excited to pick it up, in all honesty, because with their last album being dubstep, I really thought they were going to continue along that road, and I was like, no, this could be the end of Korn, really. Even though I did enjoy the Path of Totality quite a bit, I still think it wasn't Korn themselves. But when the news got out that Head was rejoining the band, I was quite excited because I thought, oh, he could bring like the old style back to Korn, like the heaviness and shit like that. And I was right in thinking so. This album is pretty much old school Korn. It's brought to the present. From the eras such as Take a Look in the Mirror, Untouchables, and even Follow the Leader from a little bit thrown in there. It's just such a good album to listen to. It's definitely one of my favourite. It's definitely, put it this way, it's my favourite Korn album since Take a Look in the Mirror, because that was definitely one of my favourite albums of that of the Korn discography, and personally, this is the best album they've put out since that album. So, if you like your old school Korn, definitely check out this album. You're gonna love it, as I did. All right, the second honourable I can't even speak tonight. Second honourable mention goes to me boys in Plaguerider with their self-titled album. For those who are into their old school death metal, like old school thrashy influenced death metal, and you haven't checked out Plaguerider, I really urge you to do so. Just a real modern take on the old school death metal. These guys have brought out an album which is so catchy and makes me proud to be a metalhead from the Northeast. Really heavy, technical, just over the top beast of an album, in all honesty. Just a fine example of Northeast metal doing great. And if you haven't checked out this album, I really recommend you do so, because it's a sick album. Really, really good job, Plaguerider. So yeah, here's the top 20 albums that I was on about before. I've got 19 CDs here and one that I just need to mention to you, but I'll get that when it comes to it. So yeah, coming in at number 20, we have Exodromos by Wormed. This album was quite a surprise of this year, because for me, I'd never actually checked out Wormed in any forms of music, and I don't know why. I'd always knew the name, but never actually sat down to check them out. And then when I heard they were bringing out a full album this year, I was like, oh, last year, I was like, oh, gotta check this out. And I checked it out, and my God, did it blow me away. This is some of the heaviest, most technical pieces of brutal death metal to come out last year. Just a real evil, real destructive approach to the brutal death metal circuit. For me, it's right up the lines of bands such as Psychotoxin and stuff like that. And if you're into your slam, brutal, technical death metal, then I would really recommend you check out Worm's Exodrome was. It's a fantastic album and definitely a stick out in my collection. So, yeah, definitely check that out. Alright, coming in at number 19, we have Exit. I don't know how to pronounce this. I think it's Exist, but with the brackets it could be Exit. I don't know, but I'm going to go with Exist. Exist by Reflections. Now, progressive bands and tech bands in the Gen circuit have really unbelievably blown up last year, with a load of bands coming out with loads of albums, even festivals popping out here and there, and just blew up necessarily. And there was a lot of bands that really took on the Gin style very well. But there was one band that I was quite excited for when they announced that they were bringing out a new album last year, and that was the band Reflections, because their first album was amazing, like a really solid album, a really good take with the Gen tone and the progressive deathcore side of it. It had some really heavy parts and some very catchy, weird timing parts, and I really enjoyed that album. But this album, it seems like they've just continued off from the last album, but in all honesty, I think they've focused a little bit more on the overall tones of each instrument a lot better. It sounds a lot more fuller than the last album, and above all else, it sounds a lot heavier. And it's definitely one of the heaviest heaviest progressive deathcore releases to come out last year. I keep on getting it mixed up because, yeah, I should have done this a lot earlier, in all honesty. But if you're into your progressive deathcore and you haven't checked out Reflections, really check them out. They're on the rise, and you definitely need to check them out. Awesome band. So, yeah, coming in at number 18, we have Exhaust by Science of Sleep. This was an album that, along with Wormed, was a bit of a band I'd never heard of, but I heard they were getting pretty big in the deathcore circuit and the technical side of things. But I'd never actually listened to them and got around to checking them out. And then later on in last year, I thought, oh, let's check this out just before I saw it on my Christmas list. And I checked it out, and I was like, oh dear God. Really, really, really heavy deathcore. If you're into your Oceano, Molotov Solution, or even Infinite Annihilator sort of stuff, then this is your type of band. A real heavy, just evil, destructive piece of deathcore. Like I said, if you're a fan of those type of bands, I can't really see much more than that. You also get some guest features from King Conqueror and Mark Defiled's vocalists on this album, and they just open it out to make it even heavier. And yeah, I'd really recommend you check out this album. It's such a good deathcore album and a great stick out in my collection, so check that out if you get the chance. Alright, coming in at number 17, we have One of Us is the Killer by the Dillinger Escape Plan. The Dillinger Escape Plan have always been a band that I've not really been the biggest fan of, in all honesty. I remember I got shown them back in the early days when I was starting to listen to the Black Dahlia Murder, and my brother showed us them, and I was like, it's not my sort of style of stuff. But after listening to a few tracks on YouTube and stuff over the years, it's kind of grown us a little bit. But then I finally decided to pick up a CD of them, and the one that I felt like checking out was One of Us is the Killer. And I was really impressed. They've got a sort of like, how would I say, like, real chaotic, obliterating style of math metal that not many bands have really sort of gone for, if you ask me. And the Dillinger have always been like the kings of the math metal, if you ask me. I've checked out a load of math metal bands over the years, and the Dillinger is still one of the best ones to come out over the years. So, but this album is a real great album. I've showed many people the band this album, and they've all been impressed. And it seems from on the likes of the internet, a load of bands have really taken to this album, and so have I. Really technical album and very chaotic, so if you're into that sort of stuff, check it out. Alright. Coming in at number 16, this is the one where I said that I don't have the CD of, because this was a digitally released album, and personally, I feel like this one deserves this place in my top albums, and I don't care if I don't have it on CD, and I'm going to maybe take that in this year, but you never know. And coming in at number 16, we have The Great Circle by This Is Divine. This Is Divine has been a local band that I've always, I'm going to say I've not really connected a lot with them over the years, because their style of music isn't really what I'm into, in all honesty. But over the last year, I really exposed myself to a load of new genres, and just experimented a lot. And This Is Divine released their album, and I was like, yeah, I'll check it out because they're local. And my God, did it blow away. I listened to it countless times, and I still listen to it now. A really good take on the sort of Every Time I Die sort of style of hardcore, if you ask me, even though I'm not the biggest Every Time I Die fan. But this album was a very, very good album, and a great album that I really recommend you check out if you're into your hardcore style. It's I wouldn't say it's exactly the heaviest album I've heard all year, but it is one of the catchiest, and a one that you can actually just stick on and just get some sheer enjoyment out of it, and pass by however long the album is, because I can't remember exactly. But I will leave a link in the description to their Bandcamp, where you can download the album for free, or you can also put a price in, you can give the band some money. So support that band, they really deserve your support. Alright, coming in at number 15, this was a big surprise this year. Abandon All Life by Niels. Dear God, this was a destructive album. One of the most rawest, destructive, obliterating your ears sort of album. It's a great take on the power violence, the grindcore, hardcore, even there's a bit of death metal yucked in there for good measure. Just a real good collaborative effort of all those genres into one album. It's a short album, but at the end of the day, this was one of my favourite albums to listen to. I listened to it so many times. It's not the longest of albums, but I listen to it so many times, and I never get bored of it. If I just want my face ripped off, I'd usually stick on this album because it's so good. And if you're into your grindy hardcore stuff, then check this out. Especially if you're fans of bands like Zibalba, for example. For example, sorry. Yeah. So yeah, check out that album. Great album. Alright, coming in at number 14. Can't wait to see this band next month. Battlecross, War of Will. Yeah, I just had to check the title in case I've got it mixed up. This was quite a surprise, this band, because I'd always knew them by name, and checked out one or two songs over the years, and then when I finally got round to checking one of their albums out, which happened to be War of Will, I was really impressed with the thrashiness, the melodic death metal style that they've gone for, and the vocals kind of taken I have to say, like the Black Dahlia Murder kind of like high vocals with really low growls at the same time, and I really enjoyed this album. It had some really killer riffs, really punishing vocals, and just some really catchy songs throughout the entire album. And also, as I read up, like after I listened to the album, that Shannon Lucas did the drums for it, so that's pretty cool. It plays it really tight, and it's one of the tightest albums I've heard this year, so check out this album if you get the chance. Alright, coming in at number 13, we have In the Mind of Evil by Deicide. Deicide's last album, To Hell With God, for me is the best album in the band's discography, with the Stench of Redemption a close second. And it really made us think that what was the next step for Deicide? Were they still going to continue along To Hell with God route, or will they go back more old school? But they've continued along the To Hell with God style. They're pretty much sticking to their roots and pulling out the best album I've ever heard from this band. The heaviest, most evil sounding album that I've heard them pull out with, and also it's got a lot of catchiness to it, like really groovy kind of riffs here and there that really make your attention stick to the album. And when this album came out, I was like, God, this is such a good album. But yeah, I really recommend you check out this album if you're a fan of Deicide. You're not going to be disappointed at all. Alright, coming in at number 12. Me mate had this as his top album, but for me it's standing at number 12. Labyrinth by Flesh God Apocalypse. Flesh God Apocalypse, everyone knows the band nowadays, and for me, now that I've listened to them a little bit more over the years, Agony has kind of dwelled down a bit on it. I think it's not exactly the best album I've ever heard. But I have to say that Labyrinth is, since it come out, and I've listened to it a lot more, it's never dwelled down at all. Every time I listen to it, I get blown away. Because this is, for me, as I've said to most people, it's got a lot more matureness to it. The mix is a lot better than Agony. And for me, it's got a much more... It's got a bit more of an enjoyment to it rather than a rip your face off kind of feel that the last album had. This one just seems like a one that, yeah, I fancy listening to symphonic death metal. I'll stick this on rather than Agony. But it's kind of like Oracles, if you ask me. It's kind of taken that more kind of an approach, but with a much better mix to it. But without a shadow of a doubt, Labyrinth is now my favourite album of Flesh God Apocalypse, with Agony a close second. So yeah, check out that album, it's great. Alright, coming in at number 11, we have Omen of Disease by Broken Hope. This album was a big surprise this year because, like, I'd never heard of Broken Hope, but I knew they were kind of very well known on the death metal circuit as being one of those bands that kind of made it big, as far as I'm aware. But when they were coming out with their new album, I thought, oh, I'll give it a try, see, because I want to get into like the older bands as well. And I checked it out, and my God, did it blow me away. A real, just pretty much modern death metal, very melodic, but still very heavy production and guitar riffage throughout the entire album. Some really fast-paced drums, as you can expect on any death metal record. But for me, the modern death metal that's where it stops. This album has kind of some really low, sort of like as a Sven from Aborted type of lows throughout the entire album. Just really destructive lows, if you ask me. And personally, I really enjoyed this album, and it did get open my eyes to a lot of death metal, and especially their old discography. But I still think this is my favourite album so far from the band. So yeah, check out this album, it's fantastic. Alright, now we're into the top 10. Coming in at number 10, we have Death Will Reign by Impending Doom. So, some of you may know, if you know me in person, that after listening more to the last two albums, like There Will Be Violence and Baptized in Filth, that those two albums were, in my opinion, a very big disappointment compared to the rest of Impending Doom's discography, especially compared to Servant and Kneel Dead Risen. And I was kind of worried that they were going to go down that route, but when I seen the album artwork, I was like, this is going to be even better than I thought. And it did. This is a sick, great, unbelievably good example of old school Impending Doom brought to the present date. Some incredibly heavy deathcore. This, if you're a fan of the old sort of Impending Doom from Serpent Servant and Nail Dead Risen, this is definitely the album that you've been waiting for. Ridiculously heavy and just really just evil, if you ask me. So check out this album, it's a great album. Alright, coming in at number 9, we have me boys. Scored Ashra with Torment of the Week. Yes, I was waiting for this album for so long to come out, especially when I heard the promo back in 2011. I was like, yep, I can't wait until these bring out a full-length album. And when they brought this out, I was kind of biased because I knew it was going to be good, but I didn't think it was going to be this good. Just a really sick and twisted brutal death metal, along the lines of old school brutal death metal style, and just what you can expect from a brutal death metal kind of band, like in all honesty, like what's the band called again? I can't remember off the top of my head, like Autopsy sort of stuff, if I have to say myself, but Suffocation kind of style, like really good supreme death metal. These guys are really on the rise, and they deserve your support. And just remember, all these bands that I mentioned, their Facebooks will be in the description bar below, so check them out. But a great album. If you're into your death metal and you haven't checked out this album, you will be blown away as I did. So check out this album. Support me Scottish buddies. So yeah. Next up, coming in at number 8, we have Severance by Heart of a Coward. Heart of a Coward was a band that last year I really, really got into with their, I think it's their debut album, Hope and Hindrance. And Hope and Hindrance I had a lot on repeat after I listened to it. And then when they announced that they'd signed to Century Media and they were going to be bringing out another album because Hope and Hindrance was released in 2012, they were bringing out a new album under Century Media called Severance in 2013. I was really excited, but I was still a bit skeptical, like, ooh, that's a bit of a rush there, hopefully they pull it off. And they did. They pulled out a monstrous deathcore, progressive deathcore album, and it really kind of opened my eyes to some progressive bands around that time, but I always came back to Heart of a Coward's Severance because it's a really good album, really heavy. It's got a load of progression in there and some of the best vocal work I've heard this year. A real good mix of great cleans, superb lows, and some quite kind of half screams, I would say, thrown in there every odd occasion. But really check out this album if you're into your progressive deathcore. Awesome. Check out Heart of a Coward if you get the chance. Alright, coming in at number 7, which for me was the best brutal death metal release this year. And I'm going to just do something quickly. There we are. Coming in at number 7, we have Conceived by Sewage by Devourment. I've been waiting so fucking long for Devourment to release a follow-up to Unleash the Carnivore. And did they leave it a bit long? Yes, you can say that. But did they deliver? Hell fucking yes, they did. Coming out with the heaviest, most destructive, and most aggressive album they've ever brought out. This, for me, is the best album that they've ever put out. I know loads of people would say Molested the Decapitated, or what's that? Their debut album, I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, and Unleash the Carnivore, you can't ignore those, but for me, this is the best thing Devourment's put out. It's got some really sadistic slams in here, some really heavy riffage, and Mike Reducey kind of took on a bit more of a normal death metal voice here and there on the album, and for me, it's really opened up a little bit more, and it's not as slammy as the previous albums, but for me, it's a lot better than the previous albums, but the old albums are great, but this is another level of great, so check out this album if you get the chance. Conceived in Sewage by Devourment. Alright, coming in at number 6, we have Daggers by The Defiled. Yes, I've fell in love with The Defiled over the years since their debut album Grave Times came out, and I've constantly listened to that over and over again. I've probably listened to it about 20 times at least. But when they announced a new album, I got so excited, and when I got it, and funnily enough, when I got home, I found out it was my 400th CD, and it's deservedly so in my opinion, because it's a direct follow-up to the last album, but with a much better production, if you ask me. The drums on the last album were very original to that album, but I think that this album sounds a lot better on the drum side of things, and personally it's got some real catchy songs. Like it's now got my favourite song by The Defiled, which is Sleeper, and I'll always hold that as probably my favourite song until their next album, more than likely. But this is a fantastic album, direct follow-up. In all honesty, nowadays I can't decide between this one and Grave Times, but definitely check out this album if you're into your groove metal or industrial metal. Check it out, it's really good. Alright, coming in at number 5, we're into the top 5 now. We have Altered State by Tesseract. This I kind of knew was going to be on a few people's lists because Tesseract are a very well-known gent band, and I couldn't say like the attachment from the early material, but this album, Altered State, I can't say it other than this. This was pretty much the soundtrack to my summer last year. Going on holiday and listening to this album on the constant, it really brought up the moods, and really it made us enjoy the summer a lot more, because there's nothing better in my opinion than having a great album to listen to over the summer period and have it on repeat, and it just never gets boring. And even over the winter, autumn period, and even into the new year, this still doesn't get boring. It's such a good album, very atmospheric, it can have some heavy moments in all honesty, but just a sheer enjoyable gent album. If you haven't checked out this album, then I would be ashamed, because this is amazing. I love this album, and I always will. Alright, coming in at number 4, we have The Divinity of Purpose by Herebreed. This album was released earlier in the year, and in all honesty, over this year I kept on forgetting what it actually sounded like. And then after seeing them live and then giving this another spin just before, when I was coming to the end of choosing my top albums, I was like, yeah, I forgot how good this was, and shoved it straight away up to number 4. Definitely the best thing I've ever heard from Herebreed. Herebreed never really disappoint. They've stuck to their style over the years, and personally, I feel like this is probably the best thing that I've ever seen from Herebreed, and songs that have really stuck in my head over this year, and that's what I feel like none of the other albums we've gone through so far have done. But this album has definitely made us stick a lot in my head, so check out this album if you get the chance. It's formidable. Alright, now we're into the top 3. Coming in at number 3, we have Hellbound by Fit for an Autopsy. For those of you who remember my top albums of 2011 when I did it, Fit for an Autopsy's The Process of Human Extermination was also at number 3. So it was kind of strange that Hellbound reached number 3 on my top albums, but it really deserves it, because Fit for an Autopsy are one of the upcoming deathcore bands that have really punched me hard in the face, in all honesty, with some of the heaviest, probably the heaviest breakdowns that I've heard this year, and just some of the most evil sounding vocals I've ever heard from a deathcore record last year. And just, it's pretty much, if you ask me, kind of like Molotov's Solution did with The Harbinger, but in 2013. This is amazing. It's made a great impact on me, and I can't stop listening to this album. It's so good. So check out this album if you're into your deathcore and you like your deathcore to be heavy. So yeah, now we're on to the top 2, and coming in at number 2, we have Disarm It by Killswitch Engage. Loads of people really expected this to be my number 1 album, and even so I thought it was going to be my top album. And deservedly so at number 2, I think, because this is Killswitch Engage returning to form after Howard's departure. And Jesse coming back, I was really nervous because, in all honesty, Alive or Just Breathing, I'm not really blown away by the vocal performance on that album. But this album, it's really stepped up like a million levels. His cleans have become more clearer and more, how could I say, meaningful, if you ask me. And his kind of growly, shouty kind of style that he's got has really been highlighted a lot, and he's obviously been practicing a lot and working with his voice a lot more over the years since he's been absent from Killswitch Engage. And now that he's back in and wrote some really great, meaningful songs, and some of the best songs of the last year, it really deservedly so. To the point that this album has now turned into my second favourite Killswitch Engage album, behind As Daylight Dies, but that'll always be my favourite. But this is still a fantastic album. If you're into your Killswitch Engage and you haven't checked out this album yet, get it. You won't be disappointed. It is fantastic. But it's not quite as fantastic as my number 1 album. All these albums have really hit me hard this year, with some great, memorable releases from loads of bands, and just a formidable year for metal. But there's been one album which has been on repeat the most. I've listened to it probably about 20 to 30 times, more than any other album that has came out last year. And for me, seeing this band about 3 times this year really highlighted why I wanted them to be, well, pretty much not why I wanted them to be, but why they were my top albums, because they can deliver what is on that album live better, if not on the dot, of what this album sounds like. It's formidable. And better late than never, because we've been on the camera quite a while. But number 1 album of 2013 for me has to go to The Escape Key by Kite. Deservedly so, lads. You've brought out an album which has really stuck with me over the years since I first heard it. I can't remember when I first heard it, but you've come out with some just a real proud album, which makes me to be a northeast metalhead. This is a style of music that isn't really played a lot these days, and you have come out with probably the best melodic metalcore album I've heard in such a long time, in all honesty. It's such a good album, and I'd urge you to check out any track from this album, from The Escape Key to Removed, The Escape Key, Perfect, Murder of Crows, Sanctuary, From the Night, amongst that. Just all the tracks on the album are fantastic, and just an absolute memorable album. And I will be recommending this to anyone if they say, "Oh, can you recommend us any metal bands?" I will continue to spread the word about this album because it deserves it. And personally, I'm just so proud of you guys for bringing out this album, and it's definitely one of the best albums in my collection. So congratulations, and I hope to see you at a gig very soon. And yeah, so congratulations, Kite, on winning my top album of 2013 with The Escape Key. I'll leave the link in the description to their Facebook page, so you can check it out. And on that Facebook page, you can also buy the album. So check out that Facebook page and check out all the bands that I've mentioned before. We've already had some killer releases from 2014, so I'm sure we'll get some more coming as the year goes by. So Next video will probably be me updates and purchases, but until then, I'll see you until the next video, and remember, stay metal!